Welcome to Custer Wolfe. I'm RT.
And I'm Tyler.
And today on Building a Watch Company, we're talking about the origin story of Vortic and how we got here.
I think a prudent place for us to start is how we met.
Right? Yeah. So the year was 2011, and we were running a painting business. Shout out to College Works Painting. A multi-level marketing company in the world of exterior house painting. Mm-hmm. And we sat across the table, started this painting company, right, together. We were figuring that out. I think at some point during the summer of painting houses, you told me you like playing golf, and then when we got back to Penn State for school the next semester, we played some golf, and we had a really good idea on the golf course.
Yeah, and I mean, essentially, I just blamed my bad shot on my loose-fitting watch. And from there, that kind of launched the idea of a fine adjustment wristband that we went forward and we patented. The idea of Vortic's name is actually from that concept because it was a twisting mechanism. So we combined vortex and tick-tock to make Vortic. Mm-hmm. And later on when we pivoted, really the only reason we kept the name is because we already had the LLC and the website.
Yeah, and I think the whole original concept of the original idea or twist to fit idea that we had was really cool, and we were talking to a bunch of people about it. We won a business plan competition at school about it, but pretty much everyone that we talked to, like all of our advisors and professors that we bounced the idea off of, they were like, hey, it's a great idea, but it's going to cost a fortune to make, so maybe we should start with something else. And that's kind of how we got into doing some research on what else could we do. If we're going to build a watch company, should we make it in America? And I think we decided let's try it. And then we stumbled on the history of the old pocket watches and started planning the Kickstarter for the American Artisan series.
Yeah, along the lines of being really expensive, we decided to try and go out and get funding for that idea. We even went out and tried to get investment. I remember being at a venture capital event and pitching our company, and one of the gentlemen that was judging the pitches asked me for financials. And I said, we don't have financials because we don't sell anything yet. And he just kind of laughed. So that's really where we were at. And that's why Kickstarter was a good option for us, because we were obviously striking out with gaining investment, and it was a really good option. So in order to do that, we had to kind of find what might be considered a simpler product. And that really came from just one day RT visited me in Philadelphia. I had a small iPhone repair franchise where I was fixing cracked iPhone screens in Philly, and I would drive around to different people's homes and restaurants and kind of fix the phone in front of them. RT was in town for a day, and he rode along with me. And over the course of that day, somehow we came up with the idea of combining 3D printing and American-made pocket watch movements.
Yeah, and I forget exactly how we decided to create that, but that's what we call the American Artisan series on Kickstarter. And at some point after that, I took a job here in Fort Collins, Colorado. Moved out here. You were kind of over the business in Philadelphia and came to visit me, and we're like, this place is awesome. What if we started that watch company? Filmed the Kickstarter in our garage at that point, and I mean minimum viable product, right? It was literally 3D printed. If anyone remembers the original, we call it version 1 watch from Vortic, it was 2 case halves that we put together and just 2 screws over it, so it sandwiched the old pocket watch movement in there. Was definitely not waterproof in any way.
No.
Super glued together. Every single part of it was 3D printed, but it was completely made in America, and it was an antique pocket watch built into a wristwatch. And thankfully, people on Kickstarter thought it was super cool, and since that day, we've sold every single watch we've ever made, typically before we made it. So, knock on wood, good idea.
Yeah, I mean, we legitimately glued the watches together that we took pictures of and put on Kickstarter in order to sell, the first few of the real product once that was going to be done.
And that was like 2014, 2015?
That was 2014. And I would recommend you get closer to a finished product before you
100%.
launch a Kickstarter than we were.
Yep.
Because after we did well on Kickstarter and we were super stoked about our performance, but it took us a really long time to go backwards and then figure out the product because, like I said, we glued it together.
Yeah, I think we launched Kickstarter November 17, 2014, and we shipped the first watch to a customer, I don't know, late summer, like maybe September of 2015.
It was at least a year later.
Yeah, so I'm overestimating it. It was Q4 of 2015 that we shipped the first watch. And then, we were making those Kickstarter watches for another year after that. So some
Correct,
people
yeah.
didn't get them for a couple years.
Yeah.
But it's how we got started, So Kickstarter's how we got going. I think we used that to prove to investors. And now we have financials. We have sales. We have all this stuff. And so we went out, raised some money, and started to grow. And so we went from the basement and garage of that house here to the Rocky Mountain Innisphere in, would you call it a closet? Like, it was like a forgotten room that they put us in the very corner of the building, maybe 400 square feet.
Like 360 or something.
Yeah. So, and at that time, you were hand assembling every watch.
It was me in a room.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you emailed Vortic, I responded. If you were on Vortic's website, I built it. If you were wearing one of our watches, I made it.
Yep.
But at that point, the plan was just to assemble parts and have other people make them.
Yeah, we used a lot of contract manufacturing. People were making the case and the crown and all that stuff for us. And then we were, the original plan was you were going to restore the antique movements.
I was a watchmaker.
which was not a good idea.
Yeah, if you don't know anything, if you're not familiar with watchmaking and what goes into it, it's really, really difficult, especially when we're talking about antique American-made pocket watch movements. At that time when I moved out here to Colorado and lived in RT's basement, I had time. Like I had time to kind of learn and just kind of fool around, which is really cool. I spent a year just kind of messing around and figuring things out. And something that I figured out is watchmaking is a lot harder than we thought it was.
Yeah.
And antique pocket watches, if you can just imagine when something breaks, we don't have a replacement part for it. We have to either make it or steal it from another movement. Mm-hmm. And if you're wearing one of those original Kickstarter watches, there's a good chance it was serviced by me.
Right.
Very rudimentally. I don't know if that's a word.
Yeah, close enough.
But that's how we learned. We learned by doing. Yeah. We didn't have a class. There is no class about American watchmaking and how to make a watch in the United States. Kickstarter gave us the opportunity to learn how to do it.
For sure. And across those first 3 or 4 years from 2014 until really scaling the business, really from all through version 1, as we call it, until we get to version 2, which is what most of our customers have now. You were coming to me with like, okay, we can't make or we shouldn't make this part. So I found a manufacturer to make it, or like we need to bring this part in-house and we need to figure out how to make this ourselves because like we just can't rely on someone to make us only 50 of this little component, and so there's a lot of little stuff like that, and that's, I think those conversations happened when we moved from the tiny little office in the Innisphere to Jessup Farm. Mm-hmm. And when we were in Jessup Farm, we had maybe 550 square feet, but we were in this really cool little like shack.
Like an artisan village.
They literally call it the Artisan Village. And a lot of people here know us from Jessup Farm because it was semi-retail, like you could walk into our shop. And that's when we realized we didn't want to be in the retail business because at that time it was U+2 maybe. And so we had like every time somebody walked into our workshop, you had to stop making watches and talk to them and explain everything we're explaining right now.
Yep.
And so we ended up not being productive. And so when we left Jessup Farm and moved to our current space on Link Lane at 2,000 square feet then, and we started getting machines, I think that's when we started to scale rapidly, because we were appointment only. It was just, we're going to make it, and then we're going to sell it online, direct to consumer. We're not going to worry about all those other things. And I think that's when the business really started to take off. Through 17, 18, 19, we scaled into 4,000 square feet, got the unit next door. And then, 2020 was, sales-wise, great year for us, which allowed us to secure this building and now double again to 8,000 square feet.
Yep. Yeah, I remember very clearly the shift in our perspective when we went from we need other people to make our stuff and we assemble it to there is no option unless we make it ourselves.
Yeah.
If we're just talking about how much people hated making our parts, we constantly had machinists just telling us like that's not a good idea. You shouldn't do that. We were initially working with a fully 3D printed product. And if anybody out there is in the machining or manufacturing world, 3D printed parts they're tough to hold on to, and they're not perfect. Holding on to it as you machine it to add threads and holes, like we have to for those products. Everybody really hated doing our work. It was actually our machinist in 2017 told us we need to buy a machine. I said, we can't afford that. And he said, for what you're paying me, you can.
Yeah. He's the one that walked me through, like, all right, you got to call this person, get a lease, or you can call these people to get a loan on it, and like the monthly payments are about what you're paying me anyway, and you can make all these other parts. Like, he literally talked us out of paying him to make our parts.
And he sent the Haas machine salesman to our shop to continue that conversation. So in I think it was like the end of 2017 that we placed an order for a super mini mill.
Yep.
And that opened our eyes to, because we were just machining cases at that point, just post-processing 3D printed cases at that point.
Yep.
But when that machine was on our floor, there were other parts that we were having other people make, other parts that we were plastic 3D printing, and we quickly realized that if we can make perfect parts ourselves, it's incredibly valuable. And just even more so in the sense of how much more creative you can be. Because if you can draw it, you can machine it, and then you can test it. A lot of times you can do that all in the same day.
Yeah.
Whereas prototyping from a machinist like Jeff is really expensive, and they usually don't have time to do it right away. So if you need to go through multiple iterations of a product, it can take a year.
Yeah.
It can really take a year, and that's, obviously at that point we didn't have a year, even though it did take us a year to make the first Kickstarter watches.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, I mean, that was our first machine, and now how many machines do we have now? 5?
I'm planning on buying our 6th today.
Right, yeah. So scaling up to 6, and that's what this room is going to be. So this whole room will be filled with machines. We got our electricity run, had to get 1,000 amps run to this building. Thanks, City of Fort Collins, for massively improving the capacity of this building. We're going to fill this room with machines. This is really going to be your space. And now we can make, basically every metal part on the watch in-house right here. And then the rest of the building will be, assembly, other parts refining, parts finishing, all that kind of stuff. And really I think that's where we're going with the show, is we want to show that whole process, figuring out how to put these machines in the room, figuring out how to make all the new parts, figuring out how to scale this thing.
Yeah, this is a really cool opportunity that we have here. We can use what we've learned over the past 7 years, and I wouldn't call this building a blank slate because it's had a lot of other tenants in the past, and it is kind of a funky building.
Yeah.
But it's really cool to be able to work with the general contractor to get exactly what we want. Because I remember it had to have been 2017 when we were looking at spaces to move to from Jessup Farm. we walked into our current space that we're in now, that we're renting, and it was just 2,000 square feet of cement floor and drywall.
Yep.
And I was stoked. I was like, this is exactly what I want. I
Empty.
want a completely blank slate. You know, we started, it was only 2,000 square feet. I mean, it was fairly affordable rent, actually less than what we were paying before for that retail space.
Way less, yeah.
But we even had a subleaser in the shop with us.
Right.
Because 2,000 square feet was an insane amount of space for us.
Way too much space, yep.
So we had a sublease in that space, and then we realized we need to build a clean room, because we used to just have plastic draped from the ceiling to surround our cleanish room. And then we built walls to create a clean room, and you know, we've done a lot with a little in that space.
Yeah.
But here, there's nothing in this building. We don't need to build watches here until it's ready for us. So we're building a really nice clean room. We're going in depth with the HVAC. We're controlling the temperature of that clean room, controlling the temperature of the machine room.
Yeah.
So parts are the same temperature when they're made and when they're assembled. We're building a TV studio so that we won't be sitting in here, hopefully someday in the future, to film this show.
It's going to be exciting, you know, as it all comes together, and you know, we can't wait to show you behind the scenes into how it's all made, where all the parts come from, and what it's like to build a watch company. So this is episode 1 of what will hopefully be hundreds of episodes as we go, you know, scaling this thing, and let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to see, and that's really the point, is we're just going to talk about it and share all this stuff, because I feel like people don't do that as often as they should. So yeah, that's episode 1 of Custer Wolfe building a watch company. You know, like Tyler said, we've built Vortic to where it is now, and in order to scale, we're building a second company. We can't tell you what it's called yet, but we're going to give you a behind the scenes look into all the challenges of what we're going to face round 2, you know, trying it again. And so make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow along on Instagram, sign up for the Vortic email newsletter so you can get weekly updates. And you can watch us here trying to build a watch company.